My name is Gavin Evans, and this is my review of Super Mario Bros. The 1993 movie, and this will be a spoiler-free review, so if you haven't seen it, go and watch it, then come back and watch my review because I will be going in depth. Now, this is a movie that people love to hate. Everyone calls it the worst video game movie ever made, one of the worst movies ever made, and for a long time, I was right there with them. But in recent years, my taste in movies have developed, and it's a movie that I look back on, and I was just like, I wonder if I'd hate this movie as much as I did back then now. So I gave it a rewatch last night, and I have to say, this movie isn't as bad as I remember it being, but still not quite good yet. Let's get into it. First of all, this movie is directed by Annabelle Jankel and Rocky Morton, who are husband and wife, and I can't think of any other directors who are husband and wife duo, so I do think that's pretty cool. But I think they do a good job directing this movie for the most part. They clearly have a vision for it, and they displayed it very well. The production design, the costume design were all really good throughout this movie. And I love how they kind of decorate this city with this fungus that just adds an extra sliminess to this movie that I really do like. So visually, this movie is well directed, but I do think on pacing, it needed work. This movie is lacking in energy. Once the initial weirdness of this movie wears off, it kind of loses you for a bit, and it does make for some pretty boring moments at times. Like I said, I appreciate the ambition and just what they brought to this movie, but I wish they found a way to keep this movie moving at a good momentum. Now, I do actually really like the story here. Like, it's just one of those weird, insane plots that you can't believe is actually real. Like the first 2 minutes, you find out that when the meteor hit Earth, it didn't destroy the dinosaurs, but it created a parallel universe where dinosaurs evolved. Like, that's such an insane introduction to this movie. Like, this movie is about this alternate dimension filled with dinosaur people, and Mario and his brother Luigi get sucked into this dimension and have to rescue a princess from the dictator running it. Like, they could have played this movie as safe as possible and gave you the Mario plot that you would be expecting, but you know what? I appreciate the originality here. Like, yes, it's very loosely a Mario movie, but if the end result is something more different and more out there, I'm okay with it. Like, I'm not super passionate about Mario, so maybe if I was a Mario super fan, I wouldn't feel the same way, but this plot does work for me. Now, just because I like the story doesn't mean I like the script, because I do think the script is lacking in certain areas. Like, it does feel like a bunch of random things are happening at a random point. There's a part where Luigi and the princess get kidnapped by Koopa, and you're just like, why didn't they run away? How did they just happen to run into each other there? It just feels like they got kidnapped for the sake of it. And then there's one scene early on where they put King Koopa in his machine and nothing happens, and they just happen to find a way to escape, and you're just like, I'm not sure I buy this. Like, if you're going to do an escape scene, fine, but you've got to sell it a bit more, and I'm not sure this movie does. And this movie is thematically empty. Like, that's also to be expected with a movie like this, but it's so weird. I've seen some people's takes on this movie online, and some people think it's anti-cop and all this and that, and I don't think the movie has a clear stance on anything. I think it's just a story where certain elements are present. I don't think it's trying to say anything, and I'm okay with that. But if you take a movie like Batman Returns, which I love, it's one of my favorite movies ever made, it's not just weird and crazy. It's also grounded in the idea of all these different people just trying to find their place in society. And that idea really grounds the story, the characters, so no matter how crazy that movie gets, it keeps it grounded. And I do think this movie was lacking something to keep it grounded, to keep you emotionally invested in what was going on. Because the truth is, I didn't care about any of the characters. I didn't care about what was going on. It was just a movie that left me feeling empty for lots of the movie. Like I said, when the movie begins, you're just like, this is crazy. This is so weird. And then after the first 20 minutes, you're just like, now what? And you don't really feel much in this movie. And speaking of Batman, I'm actually going to compare this movie to another Batman movie, and that's Batman and Robin. I legitimately really like that movie. Lots of people hate on it, but every single complaint I've heard about that movie, it just seems off of me. Like, the stuff that people laugh at is the stuff that you're supposed to be laughing at. So I don't really get all the hate that movie gets, but that movie is pure camp in the best kind of way. And I wish that kind of camp translated to this movie as well, because I don't think there's a consistent tone with this movie. It's difficult to figure out what the director is going for. Is this meant to be a dark comedy? Is this meant to be campy, an action sci-fi, a horror? What are you going for? And it just doesn't feel like there's a consistent tone, and I do think this movie takes itself a bit too seriously. There are jokes in this movie, but the movie's very dimly lit. It's got all the characters acting in a very straightforward way, and it's just not having enough fun with this premise as it could have. Now let's talk about the cast. Bob Hoskins as Mario does a fine job. It's not an Oscar-worthy performance, but he's fine in this movie. John Leguizamo, I always mispronounce his name, but I didn't find he was really good in this movie, and he's got a romance with Samantha Marthas, who I found to be bland, and you don't buy this romance for a single second. And then you've got Dennis Hopper, who should have stolen the entire movie, but he just doesn't. He doesn't add anything to this movie or to this character. He plays it very straightforward, and it's just not an entertaining or memorable performance in any way. Then you've also got Fisher Stevens and Richard Edson, who play two sidekicks, and I found them to be really annoying, and it kind of ticked me off some of the way that they handle the characters, because there's a part where they turn them into smarter people, but even when they get smart, they're still incredibly stupid. So just pick a lane, make them stupid or smart, just pick one. And then there's a part at the end where it seems like they're trying to make it seem like they were good guys the entire time, and that doesn't make an ounce of sense. Like, zero, none, nada. Like, they were definitely not good guys the entire time. Then you've also got Fiona Shaw in this movie, who I don't really remember at all in the first two acts. We might have seen her a few times, but she doesn't stand out in any way. So when she kind of turns into her own little villain at the end of the movie, I'm just like, where is this coming from? Who is this person? Why is she trying to do this? What's her motivation? And by having that surprise sort act villain, it just kind of took me out of it more than anything else. And it takes me off that she's putting the meteor piece into the meteor, and Luigi and the princess are just trying to get the other girls out of there instead of stopping her. Like, that's such a dumb moment. But the moment where she dies and gets thrown into the wall as a skeleton, I thought that was a great moment. Okay, what else can I say? The bad guy has a machine that he uses to de-evolve people. So, like, they go up into the machine and then they de-evolve them, and they typically turn into lizard heads. And I actually like that idea a lot. That kind of stuff really does get under my skin. Like, there was one movie I watched as a kid that just terrified me, and when I look back on it now, it's still a very creepy movie, and that's Spy Kids. You can laugh all you want, but that whole machine that Alan Cummings' character had, where he turns the parents into these brainless creatures, that's legitimately a really freaky idea for a kid's movie. Like, just the idea that these normal people are getting transformed into these brainless creatures is really frightening, and I wish they leaned into more of the horror aspects of it, where maybe Mario's trying to speak to Todd at a certain point, and there's still a bit of him inside, or if they went a bit more out there with the body horror element of the idea, I think they could have done a bit more with it, but I still do like what we see of it in the movie. Like I said earlier, there's a sliminess quality to this movie because of the fungus that's everywhere, but the way that the fungus is written into the plot I found to be really stupid, because it turns out the fungus is actually the king of this land, but he was de-evolved into fungus. And throughout the movie, he helps Mario and Luigi, and he gives them bombs, and it's just such a stupid idea that never really works. And there's this one scene where they're on this elevator filled with the Goombas, the lizard people. I could make a joke there, but I'm not going to. But well, they try not to get caught, so the way that they get out of this scenario is that they walk the little people back and forth, and it just doesn't make any sense while you're watching it, because then they just sneak up to the vent. I'm just like, why couldn't you have done that to begin with? Like, and like, how did you get the lizard people on the other side to look the other way without getting seen? Like, they cut away, but it still really doesn't make sense. And that must be the longest elevator ride ever. Just like how the longest one-way is in Fast and Furious 6, the longest elevator ride is in this movie. Look, this movie isn't great. It's heavily flawed. But just the fact that they made a Super Mario Bros. Movie and they could have given you exactly what you'd expect from that, but instead took it in this weird, bonkers direction, there's something very admirable about that. There is a clear vision on display, and it's very unique. The production design, the costumes, all the technical aspects of this movie are good. Now, I don't find the characters to be all that great. No one goes through any sort of an arc. There's not much emotion here. It does lack a certain bit of energy. It's a mess on what the movie is trying to be tonally. It's got plenty and plenty of issues. But I'd rather filmmakers take a wild swing and miss than to never swing at all. So for that reason alone, I'm going to go ahead and give Super Mario Bros. A 5 out of 10, slightly leaning towards a recommendation. It's certainly a movie you won't forget, and it's nowhere near as bad as people like to make it out to be. People just like to hate on the popular movies to hate on, but whatever. Have you seen Super Mario Bros.? What did you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. Stay tuned for some more videos soon, and Gavin out.